How to speak with people. Elias often felt a profound knot tightening in his stomach whenever he considered speaking English. The words seemed to vanish, replaced by a swirling fog of anxiety and self-doubt. He yearned to connect, to share his thoughts, but an invisible barrier always seemed to stand firmly in his way. This crippling fear made every potential conversation feel like an insurmountable mountain to climb. Observing others effortlessly chatting, laughing, and debating in English left him utterly bewildered. How people speak English so fluently, he would silently ponder, watching their confident expressions. Their effortless flow of words seemed like a magical art, completely beyond his grasp. He felt increasingly isolated, yearning for that natural ease they possessed, but unsure how to bridge the chasm. He'd tried numerous methods, from endless grammar exercises to memorizing long vocabulary lists, but nothing seemed to truly click. Each attempt often culminated in frustration, reinforcing the belief that he was simply not cut out for it. The thought, "Why I always make mistakes," echoed persistently in his mind, undermining any flicker of hope or progress he might make. One quiet afternoon, scrolling through a forum, a curious phrase caught his eye: "Learn English through stories." It sounded intriguing, far less intimidating than conventional textbooks. He was skeptical, yet desperate for a different approach. Could a simple story truly be the key to unlocking the labyrinth of the English language that had always eluded him so completely? He clicked on a link, leading to a charming tale about a curious squirrel and its woodland adventures. The words, while new, felt less like abstract concepts and more like vivid images unfolding before his eyes. This was different. There was a narrative, a purpose, a reason to understand each sentence, not just a standalone collection of disparate words. Encouraged, Elias sought more stories, starting with simple fables and children's books. He didn't understand every single word, but the context helped him deduce meanings, slowly expanding his internal dictionary. This gentle immersion felt surprisingly effective, chipping away at his resistance, turning a dreaded chore into an enjoyable journey of discovery. Gradually, a new idea sparked: how to speak with people. He realized he couldn't just consume, he had to produce. The stories gave him a foundation, common phrases, and natural rhythms. He decided to begin with himself, speaking aloud, repeating sentences from the stories, mimicking the characters' intonation and expressions, no matter how awkward it initially felt. His first attempts were hesitant, mumbled, and riddled with pauses. Start step by step talking, he reminded himself, embracing the process. He'd record his voice, listening back with a critical ear, trying to identify areas for improvement. It was humbling, often embarrassing, but he was finally taking concrete, measurable steps forward, however small they seemed. He started simple, perhaps narrating his daily routine to an imaginary friend in British English. "First, I wake up, then I pop the kettle on," he'd whisper, trying to imitate an accent he'd heard in a podcast. The self-consciousness was immense, but the act of forming complete sentences, even to himself, felt like a significant victory. The stories weren't just for listening, he began reading them aloud too. "Why you must read English" became a mantra. The act of seeing the words, hearing them, and then speaking them himself, created a powerful feedback loop. His pronunciation slowly started to improve, losing some of its initial stiffness and developing a more natural flow. He learned that, why reading is so important, extended beyond vocabulary and grammar. Reading exposed him to different sentence structures, idiomatic expressions, and cultural nuances that mere lists couldn't convey. It built a subconscious understanding of how language truly worked in real-world contexts, preparing him for authentic conversations. Elias found himself naturally drawn to British authors, enjoying the distinct flavor of their prose and dialogue. He would often look up words he didn't know, noticing their particular usage in that specific context. This focused immersion helped him appreciate the subtle differences and charm of British English. His confidence, though still fragile, began to bloom. He realized that, "Why I always make mistakes," was a limiting belief, not a fundamental truth. Every misstep became an opportunity to learn, a chance to refine his understanding, rather than a reason to give up entirely on his linguistic aspirations. The turning point came when he joined an online British English-speaking group. His heart pounded before the first session, a familiar wave of panic threatening to overwhelm him. Yet, he remembered the progress he'd made, the stories he'd absorbed, and took a deep, steadying breath. This was the next step. His first contributions were brief, perhaps just a "hello" or a "thank you." But he was speaking, actively engaging, even if only in a minimal capacity. He listened intently to others, absorbing their intonation, their vocabulary, and the natural rhythm of their conversations. He was finally part of the flow. He noticed that most participants were incredibly supportive, not judgmental. They understood the struggle, having been there themselves. This nurturing environment made it easier to shed his inhibitions and take more risks, venturing beyond simple greetings into more complex sentences, expressing genuine thoughts and feelings. How to learn English became less about memorization and more about active participation and consistent exposure. He started listening to British podcasts during his commute, tuning into subtle nuances and common phrases. He even began watching British TV shows, without subtitles where possible, to challenge himself. He discovered that, how to improve your English wasn't a linear path but a spiral. There would be days of immense progress, followed by plateaus, or even moments of regression. But he had learned to persevere, understanding that consistent effort, even small daily steps, accumulated into significant gains over time. One evening, during a group discussion about favorite books, Elias found himself confidently discussing Pride and Prejudice, using phrases he'd only recently learned from reading. He spoke clearly, his words flowing with an ease he'd never imagined possible. It was a magical moment, a testament to his dedication. He even managed to crack a small joke, which, to his surprise, landed well. Laughter filled the virtual room, and Elias felt a warmth spread through him. He wasn't just speaking, he was connecting, truly interacting, using the language as a bridge to others, not a barrier. This was genuine communication. The fear of "why I always make mistakes" had largely dissipated. He realized that mistakes were simply part of the journey, signposts guiding him towards greater accuracy and fluency. They were no longer sources of shame but valuable learning opportunities, embraced as stepping stones to mastery. His reading habits deepened. He devoured novels, non-fiction, and even online articles, immersing himself completely in the language. Why you must read English was now self-evident. It enriched his vocabulary, improved his grammar, and offered insights into different ways of thinking and expressing ideas clearly. Reading also provided him with an endless supply of conversation topics and ideas. He could discuss current events, literature, or even obscure historical facts he'd stumbled upon. This wealth of knowledge made how to speak with people far less daunting, as he always had something interesting to contribute. He started noticing the subtle differences in British English, the nuances of slang, the particularities of certain phrases, the distinct pronunciations. He began to appreciate the richness and diversity within the language itself, making his learning journey even more fascinating and rewarding than before. "Let's talk in British English" became a personal challenge he embraced with enthusiasm. He actively sought out opportunities to use specific British expressions, to perfect his T sounds, and to understand the context behind regional dialects. It added a layer of fun and authenticity to his speaking practice. He found joy in the small victories, understanding a rapid-fire conversation, making a clear point, or even simply holding an extended dialogue without feeling overwhelmed. Each successful interaction fueled his motivation, pushing him further along his path towards genuine fluency and confidence. The process had truly transformed his approach to language learning. He no longer saw it as a rigid academic pursuit but as a living, breathing entity to be explored and enjoyed. The stories had indeed opened up a whole new world, far beyond just acquiring words and grammatical rules. His advice to others struggling was always consistent: start step by step talking, no matter how small those steps are. He emphasized consistency over intensity, urging people to embrace daily practice rather than infrequent, overwhelming study sessions. Small, consistent efforts yield big results. He advocated for the power of narratives. Learn English through stories, he'd tell them, explaining how tales embed language in memorable contexts, making comprehension and recall much easier. Stories provide context and emotional resonance that dry textbooks simply cannot replicate effectively. Why you must read English was another cornerstone of his philosophy. He explained how reading expands horizons, not just linguistically but intellectually. It's a gateway to new ideas, cultures, and perspectives, all while passively improving one's command of the language structure. He would often share his own journey, including the many embarrassing mistakes he'd made along the way. "Why I always make mistakes," he'd recount, explaining how each error was a lesson learned, a stepping stone rather than a barrier. This helped others normalize their own learning struggles. The fear of being judged had been his greatest hurdle, yet he had systematically dismantled it through persistent effort and a change in mindset. He realized that most people are supportive, especially when they see genuine effort and a willingness to improve, not perfection. His social life began to flourish as well. He could now confidently participate in conversations, share jokes, and express opinions without the crippling fear of miscommunication. The language had ceased to be a barrier and instead became a vibrant bridge to new friendships. He even found himself offering tips to newcomers in the online group, explaining how people speak English, with a natural flow, emphasizing listening to native speakers and mimicking their patterns. He became a mentor, sharing the wisdom gained from his own arduous but rewarding journey. The joy of understanding complex British humor, the subtle sarcasm, and the understated wit, became a particular delight. He felt truly immersed in the culture, not just the language. This depth of understanding was something he had previously thought unattainable. How to learn English was no longer a mystery, but a clear, actionable path. He understood that it was a combination of consistent exposure, active practice, and a positive mindset that embraced mistakes as inevitable, yet valuable, parts of the learning process. He often recommended specific British English audiobooks to his friends, highlighting how listening while reading helps solidify pronunciation and natural rhythm. This dual approach significantly accelerated comprehension and speaking fluency for many of them. The transformation was profound. From a hesitant, self-conscious individual, Elias had evolved into a confident, articulate speaker. His journey underscored the profound impact that dedicated effort and the right learning strategies can have on one's linguistic abilities and personal growth. He even started dreaming in English sometimes, a clear sign of his deep immersion and progress. These dreams, though often fragmented, were a powerful indicator that the language was becoming an intrinsic part of his cognitive landscape, not just a learned skill. The initial question, how to speak with people, had evolved into a natural, almost subconscious process. He no longer overthought every word. The sentences formed themselves, drawing upon the vast reservoir of knowledge and practice he had diligently built over time. He often reflected on the days when he was paralyzed by fear. Now, those memories served as a testament to how far he had come. His journey was proof that persistence truly pays off, especially when combined with a strategic and enjoyable learning methodology. He never stopped reading, understanding that, why reading is so important for continuous improvement. The more he read, the richer his vocabulary became, and the more nuanced his understanding of sentence structures and expressions grew over time. His daily routine now naturally integrated English practice, from listening to the BBC News over breakfast to reading a chapter of a British novel before bed. It was no longer a chore but a beloved habit, seamlessly woven into the fabric of his everyday life. He recognized that, how to improve your English, was an ongoing process, not a destination. There was always something new to learn, a new idiom to grasp, a different accent to decipher. This continuous learning kept his passion for the language alive and vibrant. He even started writing short stories himself, initially in simple English, then gradually incorporating more complex vocabulary and narrative structures. This creative outlet further solidified his command of the language, pushing him beyond mere comprehension into active creation. The feeling of effortlessly engaging in a lively British English debate, understanding the cultural references, and contributing meaningfully, was truly exhilarating. He was no longer an outsider looking in, he was an active, confident participant in the global conversation. His journey from being silent and apprehensive to articulate and engaged was a powerful narrative in itself. It proved that anyone, regardless of their initial struggles, could achieve significant fluency with dedication and the right tools. He discovered the joy of British slang, learning when to use phrases like "spot on" or "chuffed to bits." These small linguistic discoveries made his conversations feel more authentic and helped him connect deeper with native speakers on a cultural level. Elias, once a quiet observer, now found himself initiating conversations, eager to "let's talk in British English" with anyone willing to engage. His confidence was infectious, often inspiring others to embark on their own language learning adventures with renewed vigor. The transformation wasn't just linguistic, it was holistic. His increased confidence in English spilled over into other areas of his life, making him more assertive and open to new experiences in general. Language learning had profoundly impacted his entire persona. He learned that fluency wasn't about perfection, but about effective communication and connection. It was about being understood and understanding others, enjoying the process, and embracing the journey with all its inevitable bumps and triumphs. His advice became, immerse yourself, find joy in the process, and never be afraid to make mistakes. These were the fundamental pillars of his own success story, transforming a daunting task into an enjoyable and deeply rewarding personal quest. Elias now understood how people speak English, not just grammatically, but culturally and emotionally. He grasped the nuances, the unspoken meanings, and the ways in which language truly connects individuals at a deeper, more meaningful level. His initial anxiety about "why I always make mistakes" had morphed into an acceptance that mistakes are simply invaluable data points, providing insights into areas that require further attention. They were guides, not roadblocks, on his continuous path. He became a firm believer in the power of stories. "Learn English through stories" wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was the method that had truly unlocked his potential, making learning natural, memorable, and deeply engaging for him. The constant exposure from "why you must read English" had expanded his mental database of words and phrases exponentially, providing a rich tapestry from which to draw during spontaneous conversations, making his responses more varied and fluent. And finally, his deep dive into "let's talk in British English" gave his language learning a specific, enjoyable focus, allowing him to appreciate the unique charm and expressions of a particular dialect, enriching his overall linguistic experience immensely.